So, hello everyone. So, we are about to begin the next track session of the day. So, please be seated. First, I would like to invite moderator for the session, Mr. Kalpesh Doshi, Group Chief Information Security Officer of HDFC Life, onto the stage. So, our track session will be revolving around CISO as a digital business enabler, CISO enabling new possibilities for transaction possibilities. So, over to Mr. Kalpesh, sir.
Hello, hello, hello. Yeah. Good afternoon. How many CISOs in the room? Okay, I'm raising my hand. I'm a CISO. Oh wow, I can see some hands. Great. So do we all agree that the CISO, being seen as an enabler of a business, it is a shift in terms of what we've always believed, what we always thought. We were always the policeman, right? We were always told that we are supposed to be the watch guards, right? But enabling business is a new dimension altogether. You all agree here? Great. I think so. What we would really do is, I'm Kalpesh. I'm the group CISO for HDFC Life, and I think I'm really excited today because what we have today, I think collectively, I would put it, this is one of the a very rich experience in terms of the work that they have done, in terms of what they represent in terms of body of knowledge. So I'm extremely kind of happy to introduce the panel for our discussion today. So I see Vishal. Vishal, oh yes, I see. Vishal sir, please come. A round of applause for Vishal. Vishal doesn't need an introduction, right? Absolutely. So Vishal doesn't need really an introduction because we all know him, right? He was one of the stalwarts of the industry. When we talk about the bank and security, right? He's the one who would have said a lot of those processes early on, right? Had spent a lot of time with HDFC Bank, then moved on to Infosys, and PwC, then Infosys. So, but I think, sir, the best way is for you to introduce because
Already done it. So, that's enough.
I think moving on, I have Prateek again from Sentinel One. Um, prior to so this time I'll let Prateek introduce. I'll not get.
I don't have much to say in my introduction. I'm a field CISO with Sentinel One, former Gartner analyst, maybe a little bit familiar with my work, Magic Quadrant, and some kind of advisory work, or we may have interacted in our past roles as well. So thank you very much. I'm so glad that I'm in such an esteemed panel, and we are definitely going to have a very good time. We discussed some of the things earlier, and it looks very interesting.
Oh yeah.
So thank you very much.
Surprises.
Yeah, surprises as well.
Great. I think, and I'm also very, very happy, very privileged to introduce Bikas Barai. Uh, again, Bikas needs no introduction, right? He's been one of the innovators. A lot of people would know CISO platform, right? Where he was running that platform very successfully. But I remember I don't have to introduce. I let Bikas introduce himself. So Bikas, over to you.
Yeah, I'm one of the co-founders of Fire Compass. Built a few cybersecurity product companies early on. Another called iViz into automated application security testing, which got acquired. Now it is part of Synopsys. Now automating red teaming, a continuous automated red teaming at Fire Compass.
Oh, great. So are you all ready? Beautiful. So I think what we would really do over here is we just set it up. We didn't want it to be the normal run of a meal kind of a session. So what we'd really do is we have good leaders. We'll not ask them a ton of questions. We'll make it unique for each of them. We'll ask them one question. They'll try and cover it within 6 to 8 minutes. We'll have a round of quick fire. And how many of you like the debate that happens at 9 every evening in Republic? No, I see one hand. He's my friend, I have paid him, like you'll raise the hand all the time. Thanks, Daddy. So we'll just try and have, basically, I just believe, we normally tend to be in a zone of comfort, right? But we have, as CISOs, we all have to learn to get out of a comfort zone. So, if we have some time left, right, we would definitely want to then pick up some of the topics that normally we want to avoid. But they're not taboo topics, but they're topics where we try to shy away from them. We'll pick this up and we'll just pick up brains of the leaders over here and see what are their perspectives to some of them, right? So does it sound to be a good one, good approach? Great. So we'll not take much of time. And really get started, Vishal, to start with you, right? You really come from a very deep expertise, right? You've been there, somebody who implements security. You've been there, somebody who's providing services, right, to clients across the globe, many of the Fortune companies and all of that. So if I really look at it, you have covered the entire spectrum in terms of the cyber journey. So, from your perspective, right? I'm sure, when you started, it was CISO was always compliance role. Then it became a technical role. Now everybody is saying it's an enabler, or you have to be a business enabler, right? So there are a lot of confusion, right, on what is really that is required of a CISO, right? When I say CISO, it's not that only CISOs in the room have to really, have an impact on this. This is an expectation from the function. So maybe your thoughts on it, Vishal, how have you seen the transition? How have things really evolved, over more than 2 decades that you have seen it?
So explaining the 2 decade journey will not be possible in next 2 minutes, but it's obviously when you look at in terms of how things have transformed. And I think when I took the job, I had a team of around 3 members. I'm talking about just after Y2K, and we used to print out the firewall logs, and they were expected to scan through all the things and then sign for the auditor to comply that somebody has actually seen the log. And it really didn't achieve any security purpose, but obviously it was a good tick in the box as far as compliance was concerned. So that's a very stark kind of an example of what you want to do for compliance, but not really achieve anything related to security. Things have obviously changed significantly, and uh, I think where we are, there are obviously, cyber has really become mainstream as an issue. Any organization, whether it is a digital native or somebody who has been there right from the beginning, cannot live without digital, and digital requires a strong foundation of cybersecurity. So in my mind, the CISO role has become a mainstream role. Any organization which has not created a CISO role as mainstream is actually waiting for a disaster to happen, right? As far as the transformation of the CISO role from being compliance driven, and clearly it started with compliance, with regulations coming in and mandating organizations and especially banks, because I know Gopal Krishna committee report came out with a mandate that you should have a CISO should be independently reporting, not to the CIO. And overnight, we had CISOs coming in play and CISOs being elevated to have a risk function, which is a great thing. But then it was driven through compliance and not really through a business need, because cyber was not mainstream then. In today's day, you don't need a regulation to actually make cyber security mainstream, because the threat landscape and the issues that organizations are currently struggling with is demanding for the CISO role to be elevated to a level where it can be empowered to drive the change within the organization. But to answer your core question about how is the role change and from compliance to being business enabler. Now, in the CISO community, we've been talking about CISO being a business enabler for a decade, right? I believe now even that is a passe. And in today's context, we need to actually cannibalize the CISO role. Now, I'll tell you what I mean by that. you the fact that you are a CISO, the general perception within the organization is that, there is somebody else who's going to take care of my cybersecurity requirement. I don't need to worry about it. And that, I think, creates a big challenge, because then we don't democratize security. And today's world, business leaders, operations leaders, business enabling functions, CXOs, all of them have a very significant role and accountability as far as cybersecurity is concerned. And that can only happen if we start cannibalizing the CISO's role. And so we need to democratize it, and we need to start shouting and talking about what is the role that business has to play in cybersecurity. And that is the change that the CISOs need to drive. So that is how I believe that we can successfully drive and democratize security within the organization.
Great. So I think Vishal, really touched upon how we need to evolve, right? So maybe a little more on the cannibalizing part of it, because every CISO makes an effort. The challenge here is the language that the CISO normally talks, right? So in a boardroom, right, what we talk, they don't understand. What they talk, we don't understand, right? So we're talking, but we're not communicating. So maybe your insights on how can we really, what should we do so that we communicate and stop talking?
Yeah, I think so. So there is a thing, right? You need to be in a playground, and then you can perform and show your skills as to what game you can play. But you can't decide what is the playground because somebody else is going to decide on your positioning. Somebody is going to decide on your reporting. Somebody is going to decide on how you're going to, what your job description is, and what you're going to do, what you're not going to do. You cannot control that. That is something like a decision, unfortunately, which will be taken for by people who are not in this room, not in this conference. Okay, so we will talk about that some other place, some place where we need to influence those individuals. But having assumed the role of being in that playground that you are, then it's a question of understanding your stakeholders. Stakeholder mapping is very, very important. Stakeholders is not your team, not your boss, right? In contrary, that's the easiest part because you can influence both of them, right? the 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 rest of the organization is where you need to do the map and then decide on how you're going to play your game, right? And you have to use the age-old Indian diplomacy of Sam, Dam, Dand, Bhet, right? And use that. And the more successful you are in exercising that with your stakeholders, the more successful you will become as a CISO.
Oh, great. So Vishal, moving on to our next section of quick fire, right? So maybe a quick answer and 30 seconds or 1 minute, to probably share your insights on them. So consolidation and tool optimization will be a next big priority for the CISOs. Your take on that, and maybe a 60-second, kind of a.
Yeah, so it's been a priority for last 10 years, and we have been horrible in actually fixing this problem because CISOs cannot control it. It is actually driven by the vendor community, and they don't seem to be in a rush to actually consolidate. There is obviously platformization. There are some OEMs who are looking at it, but the fact is that there is more commercial interest and more money to be made if you add more features and more tools and not consolidate. So therefore, commercial interests are actually overriding the what are the right things to be done.
Great. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just have one point. So Vishal, perhaps a question for you. We very commonly say that security industry is always consolidating and never consolidating. And we also talk about the fact that we should have best of breed approach and let's not put all our eggs in one basket. So now when we are talking about security consolidation, do you think what would happen to the best of breed approach that we all have been talking about and making sure that that gives us the best security capability? So is it really the security vendor consolidation that we are looking at as a CISO, when you are looking at simplifying things, achieving, better security, move away from security management to security operations? Are we really looking at security vendor consolidation or security technology consolidation?
I think there are more than one right answer. In my mind, if somebody is coming to the stage or somebody is preaching that this is the way to do it, I think we are actually living in a cuckoo's land because in my mind, it depends on the context of a given organization, historical technology and security architecture of a given organization. Based on that, you will decide on what is the best approach. You don't have a cookie cutter approach where you can only do this or that. In my mind, there are multiple ways to solve this. Best of breed approach can work for one organization, but going with one stack will work for another organization. So I think there are more than one right answers. You should not just templatize and make one sort of a standard approach for this.
So I just wanted to add one thing. I think uh, the interesting thing what you mentioned is it's not in the hand of the CISO, right? It's perfectly true. Interestingly, I just want to add, it's not also in the hand of the vendor. And the reason why it is not in the hand of the vendor also is because new and new technologies are coming up, right? So cloud was a new at some point in time. Today, there are new kind of technologies which are coming up. The database also is becoming new. So the old technology becomes obsolete. So now comes another new guy with a startup idea, raise some money, go and build a company. Then another big guy will come and acquire that company, right? So it's basically nobody has control. So it becomes a kind of little bit philosophical thing. I know we had been talking about Gita kind of thing. We probably need to get into Gita to. So I don't think it will be easy to solve.
That's your 30-second answer, okay?
Yeah, that's okay. So it's everybody took 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But that's great. But thank you, Vishal, again. Maybe anybody has any questions for Vishal before we move on? I think either we had a great lunch or we had all the answers, but nevertheless, we'll have still time for question and answers. But in interest of time, we'll move on to Pratik, right? So Pratik, you spoke about, the fact that how do you consolidate all of them, right? That's again something, yes, it is definitely a point that everybody thinks about it. We also believe it's also the fact that the role of CISO has expanded, right? A CISO 10 years back, didn't have to manage a skill that they're managing it today, right? So how do you feel the role is evolved? How is the evolution of the role being, right? Also from a tech background, right? What do you feel, right? Is the hot things which are happening, right? And most important, right? There is a fatigue because it's a human knowledge, right? And I always use this in context, right? That security is always common. It's 99% common sense and it's 1% of luck, right? There's nothing else in this. If you have to really ask the ingredients, there is no third ingredient. A 99% common sense because everyone who's born, right? I said everyone, including an animal, right? Will have inherent ability to protect itself from the environment, right? And which means everyone by default is wired to know or understand what is security. All said, all done. Security is an industry, right? Thankfully, that's the reason we have jobs, right? Otherwise, if it was all common sense, I would not be having a role, right? And I would not have a job. But there's a fatigue, right? So how do you address that, right? So maybe your 8 minutes talking about your perspective, right? And how do you feel, if there's anything on BFSI, right, which is more transaction oriented, regulatory, regulated, highly regulated, kind of organizations. What do you feel is happening, and what can be your suggestions?
So I'll first start with my personal story. So as Kalpesh spoke about the fact that how is the role of a CISO transforming and changing, I would rather say that how I have seen personally the perception of a cybersecurity role changing and evolving. So I remember back in 2008 when I was exploring my career in cybersecurity. So I spoke to my team lead. I was working with an IT service company. I spoke to my team lead saying that, sir, I'm looking for exploring my career in cybersecurity and security. So what all things are included in that? And he explained me, you will have to have an understanding that where all CCTV cameras can be placed, what all physical controls can be placed, so that we make sure that everybody who's swiping in, there is no tailgating, and we have coverage of the entire workspace and everything. And from today, where when I have to explain what I do, I just say, you know about hacking, you know about ransomware. My job is to make sure that the organizations are not impacted by it. And I can give this definition to any layman, any person, a very common person who has no connection with cyber or digital world or with IT, and they understand it very commonly. So I believe we have come a long way in these last 15 to 20 years where this perception has changed significantly. And that is a reason, we all talk about digital transformation, digital journey, digital businesses. It's no longer just about digital transformation, digital business, but secure digital businesses, secure digital transformation. Back in 2020, if you ask anyone what was the main reason why you went digital, it was March 23rd, 2020. Because of COVID, we all went digital because we had no idea what to do. It had become an act of survival, then an act of transformation. And that is what is happening. That was a pivotal point for us as well, because now security also has become an act of survival than just an act of transformation. Earlier, it was a luxury. Earlier, you need awareness to be created in your organization around cybersecurity. But thanks, there is always brighter side to the problem, dark side of the moon, however you call it. So the brighter side of these evolving threat landscape and the ransomware attacks is that it has created that sensitization and awareness at every level, that it has made our life easier and of course difficult because of the evolving threat landscape. So that is why it is very, very helpful at the same time. The second point I would say is that I also feel, I'm not sure whether my co-panelists would agree with this statement or not. I also feel that the title of CISO should also evolve. I believe when we say Chief Information Security Officer, the scope is very much limited. Now that we are talking about anything and everything in business, why to constrain it to information security? Now we are not securing the data and information. We are now securing the business as a whole. Now you cannot walk even one step without having security being weaved into that particular step, or even without thinking about security. So I believe with the way we are evolving, we should also look at evolving our title. We should always look at making it more aligned with what's happening with the business. And that's where, and how would it start? The start would happen if we start talking the same language the business understands. Kalpesh ji just alluded to the point that we are not talking the same language that business wants to know. We may be talking in English and Hindi or any language that the business understands, but they are not able to internalize. And we should understand that the business only understands one language, that is cost, revenue, and risk. If you are not translating your security initiatives, outcomes, what you are doing, and if you are not being seen as a business enabler, a business leader, a someone, a person who knows or who is in the room to make sure that you go faster, to make sure that it increases the revenue for us, to make sure that I am also I'm also an accomplice when it comes to your objectives about what you want to do, you will not be able to go further. And that is a reason. I mean, if you see any manual, pick up any manual in random, pick up anything on internet, the very first thing that talks about how can you make your cybersecurity program effective is senior management commitment. And how would that commitment come from? That commitment would come from effective communication, less talk, more communication, and convincing them, talking to them in their own language, converting security outcomes to business outcomes, and then driving that point. So last point I would make is that is the reason we have seen this shift happening, where now CISOs are not just being looked upon as someone who would secure the organization or who's responsible for the security, but also being seen as risk managers. Yeah, the CEO may call you saying that, okay, we are looking at launching a new application, new public facing website, new e-commerce website. Tell us, how can we do this at scale? These are the areas that we are very much concerned about. Fix it. And that fixing, that solution that the CISO or security leader would give, that is what would establish and make sure that the application would go farther and would live up to its expectation, rather than saying that it is not possible, it is not secured, let's not go ahead. Let's not be the roadblock. Let's be the one who clears the roadblock and put the car on high speed and high gear so that we can achieve the same outcomes faster and better. Sorry if I took more
No,
than
I
8
think
minutes.
it's absolutely great. I think I really like that example of car, right? So I do believe CISOs play a role of a brake in a car, right? Now, a lot of us would say brake is bad. How many of you believe brake is bad? Brake will cut down your speed. How many believe because of brake you can't go on speed? Exactly. I think that is what we have to realize, that it's because of a brake, right, that you will have, basically, the courage to drive the car faster, because you know that even if I'm at the higher speed, if I have to stop, the brake will help me to stop. I think that is what, and that is whenever I think, Pratik, I thought, yes, we as CISOs, we have to start envisaging. Every role has evolved, right? And I'm sure even CISOs are evolving. IDC had a good survey. They have a good model. They call it 3D model. Pratik would know it because we heard it at the same time at the same place. So what they really say is a CISO, right? A future CISO who would be paid big time, right? Because I'm sure everybody in the room would be looking at some CISOs who are paid handsome salary, right? And you'll say, boss, karta to kuch nahi hai ye, pagar kyun mil raha usko, right? Then you'll say, boss, I'll go to some, good astrologer. कि मेरे को कुछ नहीं मिलता है, उनको सब मिल रहा है, right? It just says it doesn't work that way, right? So as I think Vishal also touched upon it, there are there is an evaluation of CISO, a compliance to a technology, than to an enabler, right? So what are the three components of CISO that IDC believes will be in huge demand? People who will be paid the highest salary, right? I'm sure this should, wake up all the people, even if they had a great lunch, talking about money, paisa, right? So what is it that really is important? It says three things. You could really be a technology driven person, right? And that will only take you to a certain level, right? Beyond that, it will create an hurdle, it will create limitations for you, right? You could be purely be more of a process guy, right? So you would have understanding of a business, right? So what will happen is there are a lot of people whom you see, right? They may not be the best people who understands the tools, but they're the best people who understands the process, who understands what needs to be done, and will have a solution to a problem, right? So then we saw a lot of those people came into a better demand, right? And now we are seeing really a digital enabled CISO, right? A digital enabled CISO would go beyond what a process person does, right? Because what they would do is they would be participate with the business right when the idea is conceived, right? They would be part of a discussion on how business can make revenue. Pratik beautifully said, what is it that the board wants to know? It's revenue, it's cost, and it's compliance, right? So if you go back and say that, fine, if this is the way you want to earn the money, this is what we should build as your guardrails, or this is how security can enable. There are a lot of instances where you choose a product because it has features, right? So I think that is again interesting. I think I took more time than you, but happens. But now a quick fire, right? So blockchain is complete. If you go for blockchain, I think I hear a lot of people, sir, this is blockchain, so you're completely secure. What is your take on that? So if I am on blockchain or I use a blockchain technology, is it a guarantee that I am secure?
My answer is another question. It's very commonly believed that Mac operating systems are the most secured, Linux operating system are the most secured. It's not that they are the most secured, it's just that the attackers are not paying enough attention because they are not in big numbers. So right now, when you say the blockchain is secured, so it is just that the mainstream applications of blockchains has not been, or it's not seen in common daily lives yet. That is the reason it is secured. It is not, it has not, uh, it is not getting the same attention from the attackers. The moment it becomes mainstream, nothing is secured. Nothing is secured by default. Nothing is secured by default, by design, because at the end, if you look at all these systems, it is created by us, and humans can falter.
So anybody has heard about 51% attacks? Oh, great. So there are attacks on blockchain. Great. So one more, right? And Pratik, even your own, I was, both says, like AI driven, right? So will AI, eventually, will we have a CISO, basically is a robot, and you don't need a physical CISO.
I don't think so. That will never happen. Uh, AI is an over abused term. I hope it's not unconstitutional to say this. It's an over abused term. It is something, if you are not able to prove something, just put an AI in front of it and hence proved. So let's not use AI as that silver bullet that can solve everything. Yes, what AI can help us, Kalpesh did mention about that we need to achieve scalability in security. So AI can help us in achieving that scalability because the attackers are getting faster, and we humans, it's just by ourselves will not be able to achieve that scalability. So AI cannot replace humans. AI will help humans so that we are able to do things much faster and at a scalable manner.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for that. Any questions for Pratik? Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the interesting perspectives. I have a question for both Vishal as well as Pratik. So you spoke about the interesting developments of a CISO as a role over the years. I've seen few companies where a CISO focuses only on infrastructure and infrastructure controls and information security controls, whereas the product is totally left on a total different silo, either reporting to the product officer and other sides, right? And that what happens, either both of them are not in sync, or a CISO focuses only if something hits the enterprise. So where do you see that coming together, where a CISO also plays a role of a product security person? That is my first question. I'll come back to that later.
Okay, maybe Vishal, you want to take it first? You have played, you have been in both the sides, so
So that's why it's easy for me to talk about my case study because I'm doing both. I'm the global CISO and I also head the cybersecurity practice. So anything on cybersecurity on either side and in between is my accountability in Infosys. But I think I am a very rare commodity. I
Yeah.
don't think
Yeah.
generally it's something which has happened in the industry, and but so generally I don't think it's going to happen, and that's because the roles, both these roles, from one perspective are chalk and cheese, right? One is obviously looking at completely internal, another is looking at something which we are completely external to the what we deliver to our customers, right? And product. But interestingly, during last year's RSA, so we have a global
Yeah.
CISO forum, ESAF, Executive Security Action Force, where all the top CISOs meet, and we had a survey question on this topic, and I think 30% of the CISOs said that they are or they might be asked to focus on product security.
Very
Product
interesting.
security is slightly different from what I do. I run the business. Product security is more of, for example, if I'm doing software development,
Yeah. Yeah.
then like Infosys has a core banking application called Finacle.
Finacle.
So apart from looking at my role as a CISO, I am also responsible for making sure that Finacle is secure by design
Correct.
when we are deploying it for our clients, right? So, so I think 30% of the CISO said that that's the trend. So I hope that answers some of
Yeah.
your question.
Yeah, I'm sure that's going to be a great phase shift, because my second part of the question was, today when we are pushing a lot of startups in India, for example, even the new data protection bill, after all the revisions that is being put, is looked at more like to enable at least to start somewhere rather than being too restrictive. So in that way, I think we need to also push that thought in a lot of young startups in terms to say that, hey, this is the least which you could do, both either for your enterprise as well as your products. And as we start bringing in from there, I'm sure this culture will evolve again, for your point of the next generation of CISOs. Thank you so much.
But I think the point there is what we have seen is innovation will always come first, and only when that innovation becomes has got some critical mass and some scale and some success is when somebody starts worrying about security. In fact, they start worrying about security only when they start seeing some traces of somebody exploiting the vulnerabilities. Till,
So
till
true.
such time,
Yeah.
nobody thinks about secure by design. That's the hard fact.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
You cannot change it. Okay? So we have to deal with it and figure out what is the best time to do it. So you can try a lot, but it's not going to happen. So but when the time is right, that time you just go for it and make sure that the product becomes secure. And that time you should just make sure, use that opportunity, the first instance, to prove your point, and then don't allow anything to happen after that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
thanks.
It's a
Thanks
very
so much.
wishful
Yeah.
thinking, right? It's an ideal world we would be
Yeah.
living in.
Yeah, but great. I think thanks for the question. Because now coming on to you, right? We've spoken about the evolution, right? But let's also gaze into the future in terms of what do you feel, right, from a technology perspective, right? The shift left, right? Continuous assessments, all of them are buzzwords, right? AI, MDR, XDR, right? Even we hear a lot of it. According to you, right? What are the trends, right? Or what is it that CISOs should be watching out for, right? So can you just put some more insights there?
Sure. Thanks. So I think on the business side, Vishal made a great, interesting point. We had a preparation session before, and that was a very interesting insight that he mentioned democratizing. You did not use the word here. I found that very interesting. Like, how do you kind of distribute your vision or your mission to everybody within the organization? That's very, very hard. I remember a parable that the saint points at the moon and the followers looks at his finger. Some worships the finger, some would debate the finger, some says You know, yesterday the finger was 30 degree, today it's 60 degree. That guy is out of his mind. So very few get the moon. So it's very hard to kind of do that. And I never thought like as a CISO role, that is the next thing and not like the normal business enabler thing. I absolutely agree on that. It's a very hard problem which you face as a leader, as a CEO, as an entrepreneur. Okay, back to this, like on the technology side. So I'll not talk much about the business side. On the technology side, there are two things which I wanted to talk about. So I personally like looking into like what's the major tectonic shift, major big shifts happening, like underlying shifts which will influence everything else. And if you look at those, there are two things which I'm noticing in the cybersecurity field, which is going to come in many different avatars. You will not always find it very apparent that this new technology is basically nothing but underlying theme of movement is exactly that one. So what are some like common themes which are going to drive and manifest in many different ways in the industry? So one thing is things becoming continuous. And what do I mean by that? And it's very difficult to understand, like many of the things which you see today are basically an effort to become continuous. I'll give you an example. Like the word zero trust is, I believe, a misnomer. It's a very bad naming from my perspective. And I'll tell you the reason, because people get it wrong. The zero trust doesn't really mean zero trust. What means is continuous evaluation of trust. What you are essentially doing is you are saying that I have kind of assigned a trust value, but I'm going to continuously evaluate the trust value. It is not having zero trust. It is having continuous trust evaluation. So zero trust is in effect a kind of movement when it comes to continuous. Now, if you look at like what are the other places it is happening? It is happening in many places. Like Gartner came up with some word, CTAM and something like that we were discussing. That's also kind of part of that continuous movement. And why is this continuous movement happening? The reason is the attackers have become very sophisticated. They are doing continuous attacks. They are able to attack the entire internet on a daily basis, or 4 billion IP address. They have got the capability to do that without using AI today. They don't use AI. Without that, they're able to do that. Whereas we do pen test on 5% or 10% of our assets once a year or quarterly. How will you fight with them? So that means even this has to become continuous. So personally, like I believe in that, and that is one reason at like in my day job as an entrepreneur, we are trying to do continuous pen testing or continuous red teaming. But it's not just in that. There will be in every aspect of cybersecurity, you will see these things continuous coming up. Like in case of trust, in case of identity, in case of SOC, SIEM, every aspect, things are becoming continuous. It cannot be point in time. So if you look at, we are transitioning from the age of still camera to video camera. Still camera was point in time, right? Earlier SOC was what? Once a week, you get a report. Today, it is continuous alert. The future of pen testing is also going to be like that. The future of trust is also like that, because zero trust is nothing but what it essentially means is this. So security is going to become continuous. So this is a major theme. I like going around in RSA and look at all these booths and these new products and technologies coming up. I have seen this theme across. Now there is a second theme which I have noticed, which is a very interesting theme, which is I'm a slightly different believer when it comes to AI. So I was more like Pratik earlier. So whenever I looked at any AI product, a couple of years back, almost always, if you go deep into, it's a Bayesian classifier. I have studied AI in my IIT days, like a couple of decades back. So I was never really impressed with AI because it looked like to me exactly what you mentioned. It's a marketing gimmick. Now let me tell you something. This time when I went to the Silicon Valley, we have our investors over there. I have a lot of friends who are in Google, Facebook, etc. Brightest of the minds now selling ads. They know us way better than we know ourselves. We spoke about self-awareness, right? These guys have much better awareness of us. Now, having peeked into what's happening in AI, I can tell you one thing, that it is going to be much more intelligent than an average human being in their field. Are they going to replace? Absolutely, they are going to replace average human beings.
Good, we are going to retire in a few years.
So, this is my belief that in the near future, government has to step in with regulations.
I agree.
Otherwise, there will be so much of job loss. Okay, and what kind of regulations may come up? One idea which I have is like reduce the working hours. Like during the days of industrial revolution, people used to work way longer, right? Then I think in France, like you can't work more than X number of hours. So unless government brings in those kind of things, jobs will not be distributed. So I can more or less have 99% or almost 100% kind of confidence that this is going to happen. AI is going to replace average human beings in case of legal aspects. Even today, right now, AI can do better job than an average lawyer in the US. Okay, and they are lot faster. So AI is going to replace average humans, and it's going to also happen in cybersecurity. And what you see in ChatGPT is the tip of the iceberg. That's nothing. Like that ChatGPT is a very small part of it. What you are seeing, just a manifestation of a small thing. In order to understand that, you have to go deeper into the GPTs and other forms of AI which is being developed right now, and that thing is going to completely change the world. So I'm not kind of creating a doomsday picture here. What I'm saying is it's going to get transformed. Computers, when it came, I used to remember, like, I come from a place where we had this CPIM, the communist government. So we used to write essays on how computers are bad. So we used to do that. So AI may look like that, but eventually we as human beings, as civilization, we have figured out a way to always transform. So it is going to increase GDP of the world. It is going to help things for better, but it's going to transform and disrupt things like what you have never seen before. Including in cybersecurity world, the hackers are going to come in that manner. They are working on AI right now. So if we don't get prepared, we will all of a sudden be flat-footed. So I believe these are two things which you should work on or look at: continuous, the movement of things getting continuous, and AI in a very disruptive manner. And I was on the other side, but I have shifted my side.
I think, but very good, because because two things, right? Continuous. I completely agree. We were point in time audit. We are continuous audit, and I believe your VAPT all of has to move there. And it's a wake up call, right? When you say that AI, we've seen a difference between Web 3.0, ChatGPT, Bard is coming up, right? So we're seeing everyday advent of new tools, right? And I'm sure coding today, right, is no science. I don't know, we can have a website, we can have an application up and running in an hour with you not knowing even single line of code, right? So we understand that very well. I think you wanted to say something on that.
Yes, so I would agree and disagree to one of the points that will AI replace humans or not, because we have heard of similar thoughts in 1990s when we were at the advent of computers, that computers will reduce the number of workforce and it will replace so many clerical jobs and manual jobs. But today, even in today's world when everything is computerized, we are only seeing a number of new jobs and new openings coming up. I'm not saying that it's not something AI cannot happen. The only thing that I would say that we should be positioning the use of AI a little bit differently. Rather than saying AI will replace the jobs, we should say that AI will help us shift the jobs. The spectrum in which, or the way in which we are currently engaging ourselves, those things will change. We will not have to worry about the commodity stuff. We will then have to work on the transformational stuff, and our time will be free to focus on those other things. And the jobs will shift from just doing management work. Right now, when I say management, don't take me wrong. Let's say in cybersecurity industry, right now what's happening is that majority of the time and effort, perhaps Vishal and others would be able to relate to it, majority of the time and effort goes into making sure that we are able to upkeep the hygiene of security products. Not hygiene of the company, but the hygiene of the product. Making sure that policies are pushed on time, GPU updates are getting pushed on time, and we are doing less of security operations, where we are actually doing threat hunting, where we are actually doing threat detection and response and whatnot. So I believe that job shift would take care, or with AI, the security management part, tool management part will be taken care of, so that we don't have to focus on it. And then we will be able to focus on deriving the value out of these things, the original intent for which we purchased these products or we went ahead with these initiatives. So that job shifting will change, and that is what I feel that we should not say it will replace jobs. Let's not create that hysteria, because that is not something going to be good for us.
So I agree with you. It will replace, it will change. Like, for example, in case of like when Flipkart and all came, they took away a lot of jobs of the Kirana stores, but their sons, instead of now doing Kirana stores, what they do is they do a delivery or some other right thing. So it will get transformed. But what I want to say is, as a technologist, I have never seen earlier in my life before where something can be more intelligent than humans. And this is what I believe AI is going to become, or has already become, more intelligent than humans in narrow cases. Okay, this is something which I would have never told this. Anyway, I know this is an interesting topic in itself. Just be keep
So we
keep
have,
an eye.
we
Watch out
already
for
have
AI.
somebody,
Watch out
you know,
for AI.
watching
That's
on
the
it.
only
Couldn't
thing.
hold
Yeah.
back.
Okay, I'll take a question. We'll take a question. Please go ahead. I'll get to the mic. That's okay. I'll do that.
Initially, I was with Pratik going on, but after listening, and believe me, my thought goes the same way which he is telling. Because we know the human theory, Darwin's theory. If we are using our mind, we are growing up. So the moment we are using our artificial intelligence, we are not using our mind. Most of the people will stop using mind, and then that God's Bhasmasur. It is like a Bhasmasur. So no, we will use artificial intelligence to the best, but we will kill ourselves. As a
I
human
agree.
being,
No,
it
we'll
is
not kill.
suicide.
I don't want to spread that doom and gloom. But I'm
Because
saying
you're
it's just
going
going
to
to.
be demand, yeah?
Hopefully, it serves us. I'll give you one interesting, very small, interesting story. Like, you know that this ChatGPT is able to answer all these questions. It has got the complete information of the internet and stuff like that, right? And you know how big Google data centers are to store that. It's like it can kind of take good part of the city if you just take all the data center together. Now imagine how much ChatGPT takes in terms of space. How much of space, like how many buildings will it take compared to like part of the city which Google is taking? Any guess? Okay, only this much, 1 terabyte. So you can take the entire inferencing kind of capability of Google and that kind of thing and store it just into this much. So that's the kind of how disruptive it is. Okay, so it's very, very disruptive. We will hopefully still kind of evolve into something better. So I'm not spreading doom and gloom, but never before something like this has happened. We always, as computer scientists, wanted it to happen. It was never near, but right now it is there. It's not like it's going to happen later. Let me tell you, it is there right now. Already AI is better than humans in many specific areas.
So I think we're on top of the time, right? So before we end, right, just one question for all of you, right? And a quick answer on them, right? Every time there is a security incident, CISO should be fired. How many of you agree? How many of you don't agree with that? Let's take a pulse over here, right? How many of you agree that there is an incident, fire the CISO? Baki sab dekha jayega. Shouldn't be. So how many believe should be fired? CISO should be fired? Majority wins. So anyways, our job is easy, but I want to hear it from, because from you, let's say.
So I would say it depends. It depends.
You're being diplomatic.
No, I'm serious. Like I have a role of a CEO. I also have a CISO. So if a security incident happens, will I fire or not? The answer is it depends. I'll see whether the CISO is part of the problem or part of the solution. It's a very simple thing. And many a times CISOs are part of the problem also, right? So you have to figure that out, like part of the problem or solution. Solution stays problem.
Vishal, your take on that?
I think that's a occupational hazard, right? I think, in a way, you need to have somebody accountable. And the reality is that in any organization, if there is a security breach or a failure, and if it is something, we are talking about something which creates a big problem to any organization, then the CISO has to take accountability. That is one aspect. If you look at history of cybersecurity events, then you will find that majority of the times, whether they were fired or they resigned, the reality is that the CISOs have changed the moment they have had a security breach. So you have to look at the past to then predict the future. So I think you have the answer. But logically speaking, it's not just one person. So, you should not be fired, because all of us will like to believe we should not get fired. But the reality is otherwise.
It happens otherwise. I completely agree. Pratik, your take on this?
I'll also say they should not be fired. In fact, if you look at some of these statistics, some of the CISO job openings in US and other matured markets, you would say that the job description says the candidate should have had cyber security incident experience. They should have burnt their hands and fixed themselves. They should have fallen and picked themselves up, and we need those candidates. So they should not be fired. They should be rather given more, you should be rather seeing that how can we better leverage that experience. And that is the reason I feel they should not be fired. Their experience should be used.
Absolutely. I think, but thank you all for me hearing us out, and I think I can't thank enough our panelists. Amazing views. It cuts across. It just puts on to the table that yes, it's a vast experience, and it's a privilege, to have you over here. And thank you all. You all have been a fabulous audience.
Thank you for an interesting and insightful session. So I request you to pose for a photograph now.
Sure.
Volunteers, can you please come onto the stage?